Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about raft style. Kathy was supposed to do something, but yeah, her husband is working and all that sort of thing, so I've been doing a bit of preparation. I did a little bit of research because I haven't done many raft styles, and the ones that I've seen are, to be honest, a bit cuck. So we're going to try and do it a bit better today, and I'm going to do a little bit of, Bonsai Addict twists on it as well, so that we can do it a bit differently. What I was checking on the internet is there's 3 different ways of doing the raft. So your first one is when a tree, so it's all inspired by nature. So everyone's walked into a forest and you can see a tree is either fallen down or it's been hit by lightning and a piece of it's fallen, or a branch or something like that. So you've got a straight, if we're looking from the top angle, you've got a straight piece there and your root ball and that type of stuff is on that side there, but it's still intact. The tree is still growing, the roots are still feeding, all that sort of thing. And as it develops, you'll have what was secondary branches will now become trees. So they'll then grow off of that. And normally what happens, because that side is the roots and it's feeding, those ones will be longer than those ones will be. Just natural. If you think about trees, the top is always less than the bottom. The bottom branches are growing out. So straight trunk, showing that sort of thing off. So that's the one style that you can do, is a straight trunk, lots of straight branches, and obviously doing it more in a formal styling way of it. And eventually what we do with the root ball is you will reduce the root ball, you'll flatten it on the first planting, and slowly roots will start developing underneath there. You also have the opportunity to really take the bottom of the branch and remove the bark. So you're almost like taking a knife, going all the way underneath, rooting hormone, and then pulling it into the pot, into the soil, and it will create roots over there as well. Because what we want to create is we want to get rid of that root ball eventually. So in the beginning, you'll have this big mound of soil with the raft going out from that. And a big container is obviously the best. So depending on how long you want to go for it, you need to have a big flat container. Okay, any questions so far? Happy? If I miss anything or you guys want, just ask. Okay, right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is then very similar to that, same sort of stuff in nature, but then instead of it being straight, we've got a bit of a curve in it or something like that. But what they do with this style is they go a little bit further. So there's a couple of my trees that I was actually looking at this morning with Jacques, and they've got 3 branches that would split from a point. Now normally if you're using cascade or semi-cascade, sometimes we use all 3 or we use 2 or whatever. Now what you can do with the raft is you can have a branch coming out there and you can have a branch coming out there. Now we're starting to look at depth. So instead of it just being this hedge in the first diagram, which you've got to be very careful of getting your 3D effect. So you're going to have lots of back branches, stuff coming out. Where this, you can immediately start creating depth from your other branches that are also laying flat. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be taking that guy, putting some curves into it. I'm going to be doing a wedge as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm playing with the wedge to try and get something else in the trunk, and I'll explain that just now. So that's quite a nice one to do because we've most of the time got stock which is got a bit of movement into it. If it doesn't have really good movement and it's only growing on the one side of the tree, good for raft. Okay, so if you've got one side of growth, we can lay it flat and get it sorted. So I like that one. That one I think is very doable, and you can get quite a bit out of it because you can have multiple trees and all that as well. The other one is more of you can relate it to a clump style. So it's when you've planted, I don't know how I'm going to draw this, probably from the front view. If you plant a couple of trees together and then you bring them out like that, so they're fused at the bottom. So it looks more like a clump, but you do get that it is more of a raft. So then they'll be growing further out, and you'll have, instead of a clump being very, very tight and compact with your branches out, it will be slightly more elongated. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, so your roots and all that, so your soil level is over there, and your roots are over there, and you've got this clump that's coming out, but the clump has developed. So it's almost like the tree is grown out, or multiple, say like if the seeds have got into a place and then they've all grown. So it's actually individual trees that have eventually fused. So that's why I'm saying it's a little bit elongated than a clump. You can get then in between, which they call a cloft style, which is a raft and a clump style. That was an American guy that's done some research and done playing around with that. So those are the three main styles that we're looking at when you're talking about raft. Okay, so the big thing about it is you need to have a good tree that's got one-sided growth and something that can take, you know, cutting the bark off, pushing roots. So junipers, figs, anything that will really push roots quite easily, even like the swamp cypresses that we've also had, those will work really, really nicely. What I'm going to try to do today now, I've done a couple of windsweeps and I'm doing quite well with the windsweeps these days, so I'm a bit windswept bedonderd. So that one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of an angle. I'm not going to have multiple branches, I'm just going to have a single trunk that I'm going to be going through. Now the idea that I've got, if I now work on where my wedges are, is I've got two branches here, which are going to be my main trunk or my main trees in the composition. The main trunk will be that one there with the smaller trees like that. Now that one, if I can pull it down quickly. Okay, so what I've done is I've created sort of like that branch there with that guy in the back. So I've got a little bit of depth already happening, and I've got this branch which I'm also going to get a little bit of movement into as well. I haven't put movement into that. The other one I just did a little bit of twisting so that I could figure out where I'm going to be doing my wedges. Now the idea behind the wedges is using a technique that we normally use to get movement and stuff like that in the stem, but we're damaging the bark and the stem there. So what's going to happen is if we're going to do from the top view, if we've got now there and we've got a wedge and we've got a wedge, those 2 points, we're going to have extra root growth. Everyone agree with that? So I'm going to leave the bark on the underside when I pot it on that today, and I'm going to only allow the roots to grow there. Maybe on the edge or whatever, I'll do a little bit of work and cut a bit of the bark away. But now the effect that I'm trying to get is when you've got, it's going to obviously from the front angle look a little bit straight in the beginning, but as we go to the wedge, we're going to get a bit of a bump and a little bit of a bump like that. So what I'm trying to show here is also we'll see how the wedges go. If we get a little bit of up and down movement, we're going to get some 3D movement into the composition. So I'm trying to note that it doesn't taper from one side to the other, that it grows. And almost in nature, I'm sure you guys have seen it, trees and all that, then they've got this knolled effect that's come through and then it's dropped maybe down and it's worked with the contours of the land. So I'm thinking that the wedge technique might work in our favor with this. So it's a try. I've never done it before. We see what it does. So if it thickens up in those places, I think we're going to get a much more natural effect to it. I'm first going to bring the tree back so that it talks to that branch, and then the other one I'm going to bring out so that we work with the other tree and then work away from the tree. So we, from the top as well, we'll get sort of like a triangle forming like that, if that makes sense. So I've got the pot that I'm going to be using. Now the reason I'm using this pot is, first of all, this was one that wanted to crack in the kiln, so I'm going to try and use it, so see what we can do with it. I've already done my things there and I've got my guy wires that I'm going to be using. So once I've placed the tree in here, I'm going to then solid get it into the soil and then we'll water it and all that. It should fit. If it doesn't and the edge comes off slightly, we'll play around with it. I'm hoping that the wedges bring the tree back enough that it will fit into the pot. Okay, the best ones that I've found to start off, if you don't want to use ceramics, then those drip trays, like this base sort of drip trays, they work quite nice. You drill a couple of holes and you've got a nice big base to start your raft off. Okay, so I'm going to start working on this a bit. Like I said, I'm going to do the wedges first, and then I'm going to start doing a bit of wiring, and I'm going to try and do a bit of a windswept style. The branches are going to come up to about there. So you'll see the general movement that I'm going to do is that it's got a prevailing wind from the one side, and then it's forced all the trees over. And we've got the right thing here because we've got two thicker branches and the rest are quite thin. I've wired everything, so if I do need some stuff to bring into the depth and some not, I've got enough possibilities with that. So there's quite a bit that I can do on the other side there. I just need to get those two to integrate with those, because at the moment there's a bit of a gap. But I think with the wedges that we're doing, that will also help to visually get that correct. Okay, well, I'm just going to do the wedges first. So I'm just going to pull some of these out the way. Okay, so I'm just going to open that up, and then we want to get some movement in here as well. Okay, let's get some decent movement into this. So working with the coils on the outside like usual. Try and get it a nice bend, but there's that point of no return. Alright, and then I want to just bend this one there and like that. If we do soil level there, we're going to get a bit of an issue with those ones, so I'm just going to cut them off. You can always use them for small little gins and little funny things. So someone just wired everything just in case. Also got the reason I want to do windsweeps, you can see these guys are also very 2D. So I'm going to try and do as much as possible going across and working it like that. So like this branch I might even just now change that it goes with everything there. I'm just going to place quite a bit of branches. If I need to, I'm going to just now take quite a bit out. So I'm just trying to get as much depth as possible, so if you actually have a check, if I move this one, where is this thing? You see what we're getting with that now. That's why I'm saying the bottom we are not too happy with. But that's starting to come around quite nicely. So you don't really notice the handlebars. There's so much action and that happening. Yeah, one thing I do want to maybe do is do a little bit of movement in the bottom here, because that's also going to help the whole composition. Okay, we're going to not put it in the pot today, but just as an indication. Alright, so that's what we're looking at. And then about there, what do we think? Does that show good enough? Depending on how it goes, we might change the pot to this one and make it raft slash semi-cascade or whatever. We'll play around with it. There's quite a few things we can do. So what I'll do is later on today I'll damage that and we'll plant it into something, and we'll get the roots in that outside here so that we can at least get some root growth going.